I'm Catherine Vakos. I'm the chair of the Interior Design Program, and I'm very excited tonight to present our closing lecture of the semester, and in doing so to give a really big thank you to our faculty as we near the end of the semester and look forward to our final reviews of April 30th and May 1st. This year, our lecture series, I think, has been particularly robust thanks to the input and effort of the faculty, and because Catherine Lambert, the former chair of the program, and the representative for us, our professional representative to the International Interior Design Association, the IIDA, secured the generous support of the Northern California chapter of the IIDA for our lecture series this year. Because of this, we have been able to bring practitioners, historians, theoreticians, and educators to CCA from Texas, Toronto, Switzerland, and New York. I'm delighted tonight to give a local architect and designer, educator, and theoretician, Professor Amy Campos, the lecture forum to share her work and her thoughts with us. Amy Campos is the founder and principal of ACA, Amy Campos Architect, working at the forefront of interior design practice. Her studios at CCA engage the ambitious challenge of inventing new ground for the practice of interior design, from the interior urbanism of her BART senior studio, from which the 2011 Dongia Prize winner was selected, by the way, to the reuse of the common belt and its reinvention into multi-scalar furniture, surfaces, and spaces. Her own work matches and exceeds this range of scales, from architecture and interiors to object and furniture design. As with her studios, there's an emphasis on custom-built, full-scale installation and fabrication. Students know you can't show Amy a design and not know how it goes together. Interior design projects in offices, retail, and residential venues especially is often impermanent, and materials are too often, and unfortunately, are wasted. Amy Campos's research and practice is directed to address this condition, focusing on new sustainable approaches that both plan for obsolescence and design for impermanence and simultaneously for durability. When offices or retail spaces relocate, they take Amy's designs with them to recreate the atmospheres that she made for them again elsewhere. Now that's sustainability. But I will let Amy tell you about all that in her own way, and just introduce her. We all know her, but we might not know that she has her Bachelor's of Architecture from Cal Poly in St. Louis Obispo and a Master's in Advanced Architectural Design from Columbia University. Prior to joining CCA, she was the senior designer and project manager at Atema Architecture in New York. She worked at SHOP and with Brian Healy Architects, among others, in Boston, San Francisco, New York, and Florence. She has taught design for over 10 years at the graduate and undergraduate levels in architecture and urban design, interior design. With us at CCA, she's taught architecture, interior design, and visual and critical studies. Previously, she taught at Pratt and at Columbia. Students know that Amy is a fantastic and dedicated professor, and last year, the IIDA selected her for their National Award for Educator of the Year. This year, Amy Campos won the Nancy Vincent McClelland Merit Award from the American Society of Interior Designers. Her work has been published widely in Perspectives Magazine, Interior Design Magazine, Dwell, Contract, AIA Forward, the Interior Design Journal, and Architecture Australia. She has lectured internationally in Australia last year, and most recently at Pratt in New York and at Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond, Virginia. And tonight, I'm happy to say it's our turn. Please welcome Amy Campos, and join us for refreshments right after the lecture, right in Timken reception.
Thanks, Catherine. Hang on, I'm just supposed to switch this. Okay. So thanks for having me. Thanks, Catherine, for the introduction. I'm really excited to present some of my work tonight. As Catherine mentioned, I have kind of a split professional personality in that I teach here as a professor at CCA, and I also run my own practice in San Francisco. I'm going to start by telling a few stories as a way of introducing ideas and preoccupations that run through my work. So amongst our most significant social crises today is a massive global problem of waste. From the oceanic gyres to the issues surrounding recent climatic catastrophes, it's clear that our relationship between consumption and waste continues to be abundantly problematic. Current sustainable strategies are dominated by a conservative approach to use less, make less, and consume less, epitomized by the pervasive attitude of reduce, reuse, recycle. Designers tend to unanimously accept this austere sentiment for less as a singular, long-lasting approach to materiality and design, even as our cultural and spatial needs point increasingly toward an evolving terrain of disposability and obsolescence. As in this case, what was once an elaborate theater in Detroit is abandoned and now being used as a parking lot. The global appetite for newly designed objects and spaces, as well as problems of empty or obsolescent space and massive waste, continues to intensify. This is the Seattle Kingdom, which we see here being imploded in the year 2000. At that time, this event set a world record for the largest structural implosion by volume. To contextualize, the kingdom opened in 1976 and was imploded before its debt was fully paid. It's clear here that our projections about the durability of certain built environments are out of line with the realities of shifting economies, industries, and desires. In this context, I question the idea that good design should last forever. This is Thomas Edison's monolithic concrete house from the turn of the 20th century. The houses were pre-tinted with pigment, so they would never have to be repainted, complete with concrete furniture, concrete bathtubs, even concrete picture frames on the walls. He thought the homes would be cheap, easy to clean, fireproof, and would revolutionize American living. The concept of a monolithic, unchangeable, eternally durable house didn't address people's real desires for customization, personalization, and adaptability, and were subsequently a total failure. Around the same time, access to disposable goods and disposable income increased. Americans in particular developed a vast appetite for the new. This cultural desire for newness was intrinsic to notions of style and class distinction. So think of Chrysler's success in offering their lesser quality car and a range of new colors every year, while Henry Ford's insistence on offering the much more durable Model T, pictured here, only in black, slowly pulled Ford from the top spot in the industry. While we generally think of disposability and obsolescence today in negative terms, these innovations in material production were a critical component to many medical achievements and progress in disease control. But products of all types, from housing to tableware, established a practice of updating models and designs regularly to instill a desire and perceived need for the latest and newest, even if the product's technological function, quality, and use value remained the same. Today, mass manufacturing technologies allow for larger scale products, particularly those for the interior, to be produced in huge quantities at affordable prices. These tendencies of consumption are deeply rooted in our historical social structure and are reinforced by a rapidly developing global culture. Brands like Crate & Barrel provide new furnishings for every occasion, season, and holiday. The internet and global shipping services make purchasing new things incredibly easy. Media like HGTV promote the mass consumption of furnishings and home goods by asking us to turquoise it up if we're feeling blue, with paint, furniture, and accessories, encouraging us to change our environment as an immediate extension of our mood. Despite some more obvious ecological gains, so this is Pittsburgh in the 19th century on the left and today on the right, there's overwhelming evidence that our values in relation to economic and cultural durability are out of touch with larger desires for more stuff. and we're still relatively incapable of dealing with more complex relationships between durability, consumption, and waste. Much of that waste is composed of materials that present incredible ecological problems, which we can see from this selective chart. If we were to use this chart to look at materials normally assumed to be disposable, like styrofoam or paper, we might recalibrate our attitudes about materiality and obsolescence in design. For example, this is John Grade's installation titled The Elephant Bed. This work produces inhabitable structures, so these are big enough for 2 or 3 people to stand under. They're made out of paper and structured to slowly slump down under their own weight. That slumping is engaged by placing some of the pieces over a bed of water, which you see in the foreground, which wicks up the paper and dissolves the structures, beautifully expressing the delicacy of the structures in relation to time and material. At the opposite end of the spectrum is Tara Donovan's work, an incredible lit ceiling structure made entirely out of styrofoam cups. Rather than chastising obsolescence, consumption, and disposability, and trying to limit our cultural inclination for more, it is within this context that designers can apply new and opportunistic thinking to positive and sustainable change in the world. So as design strategies, I've been thinking about obsolescence and impermanence in 3 ways, in terms of durability, modularity, and transience. These themes are not mutually exclusive, and you'll see that many of the themes run through most projects. So this is old Tico. It's only 16 feet tall. It's the oldest single stem tree in the world at almost 10,000 years old. What's interesting, though, about this particular tree is that it's a clonal tree, which means that it has a root system that can live to be over 80,000 years old, with many cycles of stems like these popping up over the course of the root system's lifespan. What I find so fascinating about this example of the clonal colony is their ability to be simultaneously renewable, changeable, cyclical, and incredibly steadfast at the same time. Both conditions, transient and durable, being equally pertinent to its overall survival. A designed counterpart to this natural phenomena comes in the form of the paper shirt collar. In the late 19th century, paper shirt parts were inexpensive, widely available, and easily disposable. They omitted the need to replace an entire shirt once a collar was stained or worn. The restructuring of the shirt to provide for modular disposable components lengthened the life of the body of the shirt and allowed for durability to adjust according to the use patterns inherent in particular areas of the shirt structure. By making the shirt parts strategically and variably disposable, overall durability and functionality were extended with minimal waste. Today, people relocate more and more frequently, an average of every 5 to 7 years in the US. And I recently did this calculation for myself, and at 35 years old, I have moved every 1.8 years in my lifetime so far. So this increasingly nomadic condition provides new possibilities for the exploration of durability and impermanence in the context of moving economies, populations, and ultimately stuff. In particular, the ability for the interior to migrate allows us to rethink what lasts culturally and materially, what retains durability, and what should be impermanent. The articulation of the interior in particular has the distinct potential to operate at these extremes. It is within these extremes that I find the most opportunity within my own work and research. So I've selected a few projects from the top half of this diagram to illustrate these ideas today. The bottom half is my teaching, which Catherine touched on, and most of you are familiar with, so I'm going to focus on the top half. So I'm going to start with a series of explorations into extreme impermanence in the form of transience or seasonality. The 2009 Indisposed exhibition at Studio X in New York asked product designers and architects to design an object that could speak to the question, doesn't disposability have some redeeming social value? And to address the dialogue between sustainability and wastefulness, preciousness and mass production. The premise of the exhibition was to question the assumption that disposability was a negative feature of design. And so we became really fascinated with planned obsolescence as a positive design strategy. The auto-cannibalistic table is a piece of outdoor furniture that acknowledged natural cycles of decay and regeneration, as well as trends in the mass consumption of seasonal products. The table was designed explicitly to celebrate this condition. It was made from paper egg flats, flour paste, soil, and seeds, and when water is added at the end of the table's useful life as a table, the seeds germinate and produce a new garden. In this case, the minimal durability of the table as a seasonal product provides an opportunity for its material content to host multiple useful lives as a result of being a short-term disposable product. We programmed the tabletop to support multiple activities, playing with the density of the points within the structure to, say, color in a coloring book versus eating barbecue or growing herbs. The table was exhibited in New York and LA, and by now is a flourishing herb garden in Southern California. After producing this table, I became really fascinated with the idea of controlling environmental cycles towards addressing those concerns about obsolescence and disposability in design. A current exploration I'm working on looks specifically to material experimentation in the design of a series of biodegradable stools, or chairs. So this is currently in a prototyping phase. So while I'm developing the project in a range of different materials, I'm going to show you one study using mycelium. So by using the root structure of various mushroom types called mycelium, which you see, there's mushrooms on the left, and then the other two images on the top are pictures of the mycelium root structure. By using this structure to mold or literally grow disposable furniture into a particular form. The mold for the growing material is an acrylic form that is designed to be stored as a light cover, which you see in the upper right corner. When you anticipate a party season, let's say, you can use that mold to grow as many stools as you need. What's exciting about mycelium is that it produces a lightweight foam-like material that can be as strong as concrete but will break down in nature in a matter of months. These first prototypes are incubating in my office right now, and they take about 2 weeks to incubate, and they should be ready for a party by the end of the semester. The next project, a proposal for the International Garden Festival in Canada, also takes a straightforward engagement of seasonality. The theme of the festival was paradise, which I defined as a symbiotic balance of interactions between individuals, species, and ecosystems. Historically, humans' concept of paradise manifested as a desire to manipulate and occupy the environment in order to create a controlled effect, so the pruned tree or the watermelon grown in a box. Today, however, we're more likely to imagine paradise through atmospheric effects produced by nature, such as the often fetishized dappling of light in a forest floor. The Snip Snap project sought to reconcile these two attitudes by reinserting the human into the environment as a symbiotic friend, to produce a benevolent manipulation of the environment that would be erased over time. So pruning is something that is necessary for the health of a tree, yet we often try to prune in a way that isn't noticeable, so as not to disturb our image of the tree in its natural state. Here, the design strategy was simple. Manipulate the dappled light condition in the woods by strategically and legibly pruning the tree canopy. So the first step was to photograph the canopy and print it on a biodegradable textile that would allow light to pass through it. This would act as an artificial reproduction of the real tree canopy. Then the next step was pruning the real canopy into a series of perfect squares, much like the cubic watermelon. Then install the printed fabric into the pruned hole. This would produce a completed canopy that was a mix of artificial imagery and real vegetation above, and would produce a surprisingly unnatural dappling of light. What was exciting about this one is that it meant that the dappling of light could be controlled towards some other end. The location of the pruned squares is determined by the tree's need for pruning, producing a series of textile-filled voids. Volumes of light would pass through the textile hanging in the voids, producing a totally new spatial condition without interrupting the perception of a completed canopy. This approach, applied through the woods, produced a new implied path, dictated by the tree's constructive need for human intervention. Rather than designing an ideal path, one circulates by reading the light and in turn reading the trees, producing a new symbiotic engagement and understanding between humans and the forest, which by the end of the summer installation, the textile would biodegrade simultaneously with the growth of the canopy, effectively erasing the installation through natural processes. So the Tapestry Workshop was my contribution to a week-long residency think tank in Maine last summer. In these situations, there's an opportunity to rethink our role as a designer beyond the solving of a problem or making of a pretty object. But rather, every project is an opportunity to think about different ways that we might engage the world. So that when I'm in the circumstance of designing a workshop during a residency in Maine, the residency is called Design Inquiry, I was interested in seeing if it would be possible to implement a structure for a collective design that would produce a communal visual narrative of the week. So this led me to think about the tapestry as this incredible object that we don't give much thought to nowadays, but as a design system produces a visual and spatial narrative form that would often tell a family's history or reinforce a myth about place. So we endeavored to create a collective narrative about the stories and ideas exchanged during that residency. Each person produced tiles as a direct response to a presentation or discussion had during the week. Here's one of my own tiles in response to another participant's presentation about modular typefaces. The tapestry produced a sort of conversation through form, and everybody engaged each other and each other's ideas through the growing tapestry over the course of the week. Where these first few projects are designed to embrace material transience, I've become really interested in how to deploy these strategies within the context of client-based work. So I'm working on developing an online interactive materials catalog for interior designers that filters technical specifications for materials into usable mappings and diagrams showing its physical life cycle and presenting its life cycle timeline in terms of use and durability. This proposed interface would give the designer an immediately understandable snapshot of information that links your use of a product to that product's durability in the world. It's intended as an interactive user's manual for ecological impact when choosing materials, similar to the way we use nutrition labels to guide decisions about the makeup of our diet. This project is currently in development now with some grant funding and working with a research assistant on the East Coast. So while the next set of client-based projects are fairly modest in terms of budget and timeline, they each offer opportunities for rethinking the way we make, design, and communicate. The ability to build, to understand building, and to understand the time and budget constraints associated with it opens opportunities within the work for unique collaborations with clients. The projects are as much about designing processes for The projects are about designing processes of implementation as much as designing aesthetic objects. In the Migrant Interior Project, transience and durability become integrally linked, much like the clonal tree example. For this residential project, my role straddled spheres of interior design, curation, installation, and organizational planning. Most of the client's emotional and financial dedication went towards what we normally think of as the least permanent, most migrant components of a project, the furnishings. The clients knew that their current living space would likely change before the things they put in that space would. So we approached the project as a set of usable environmental guides to be deployed within the space and built upon within any other space they might move to in the future. The interior as a set of inhabitable elements from their point of view seemed much more permanent than the architecture. What we ultimately designed was a plan of action, a designed timeline for use and change from place to place. Specific consistent color and material strategies that could shuffle as their family grew provided a long-term foundation for the quality of their home in any location. We spent a lot of time coordinating the finishes of the furniture. Everything new had to fit into these guidelines so that when they moved and reconfigured their interior elsewhere, the items would still match and make sense aesthetically in a new space. So the clients at that time had a 1-year-old son just learning to walk and run, and they wanted to be able to use the balcony as a place for him to play. This was the balcony before, with an overly rough concrete slab floor, oversized furniture, and an AC unit with a screen in front of the fan with holes just big enough for a baby's fingers, and a railing with horizontal bars in the guardrail, perfectly designed for a baby to learn to climb on. You can imagine how often their son was allowed to play out there. Using rubber gym flooring that can be laid in place and cut to size with a box cutting knife, and some landscaping textile tailored to the rail, we were able to make the space so much more usable without having to permanently change anything on the building. In the same way, they were hesitant to invest in a permanently affixed dining light fixture, which opened the opportunity to think about a movable installation as a more valuable, more long-lasting investment in their notion of home. Consisting of almost 100 hand-blown glass spheres suspended from 7 different colors of monofilament that would catch the natural and artificial light existing in the space, the piece is designed to adjust volumetrically to new spaces as the family moves. The design also had to very specifically address the process of installation. Of course, the final piece had to hang so that no 2 glass balls would hit each other once in place. But I also had to anticipate installing the lines in sequence so that as you raised each one up and attached it to the ceiling, they also didn't swing into any of the other already hung balls. A complication of installation that, if unanticipated, would have made the piece impossible to realize. The piece floats over the dining room, lowering the perceived verticality of the space and casting bubble-like shadows on the walls. We hung the piece from a simple grid of points, and pre-knotted and coiled every line so that the installation could happen over a weekend, so 2 days. In order to make all this happen under a very tight timeline, I spent a lot of time at fishing stores, learning appropriate adjustable knots to make the installation go smoothly and quickly, and to allow for the piece to be adjusted to a new space that might not have as high of a ceiling. These are 18-foot ceilings. One thing I didn't anticipate was that my main sort of assistant helping me with this project was afraid of heights. So she was incredibly helpful in preparing the lines and glass balls that went into each point and organizing the sequence of installation on site, but I was the only person going up and down the ladder. Doing this about 50 times each day, I realized that there's a limit to your ability to keep your balance, and we had to factor in balance breaks. We did finish in about 2.5 days, if you count cleanup and final adjustments. This kind of opportunity is inherent to the impermanent character of the interior, being more fixed to the family's evolving size, location, and eventual dispersion. Kids grow up and move out. Architecture and location here are seen for this family as a changing scaffold for a nomadic but lasting interior condition. So Acumen Fund. Acumen Fund is a nonprofit in New York modeled on a venture capitalist structure. They fund entrepreneurs in developing nations working on projects that support the betterment of the quality of life in those places. They have offices all over the world and asked us, I was working with Optima Architecture on this, to design their headquarters in New York City. They were donated an empty space, an empty unit within Google's headquarters in New York for a period of 3 years, with the caveat that it had to be designed so that Google could easily move in at the end of that time. This meant that we had to use sort of Google standard design specs, minus the primary colors to outfit the space, which is what you see here. In addition to that work, we also produced a design for a series of nomadic elements that could brand the space for Acumen Fund and move with them to their next space at the end of that 3 years, just like the Migrant Interior Project. The main element we designed, fabricated, and installed was this 100-foot-long ceiling element that hid the HVAC ductwork and created a unifying identity for their brand. Because we were acting as design builders for this part of the project, it allowed us to engage the client in the making of this element to add to the personal story of their space. We asked them to help us paint all 385 pieces that made up the ceiling, So we hosted a painting party that all of their staff, friends, families, partner organizations were invited to. Every piece was numbered and mapped to a particular color tone, so that when installed, the finished piece would gradate from darker to lighter tones depending on where you were in the gallery corridor. The ceiling was designed to be installed in panels. Pieces were laser cut out of lightweight MDF, primed white, painted a color at the painting party on one side, and slid into a hollow metal dowel. Spacers between the slats were cardboard tubes normally used as firecracker housings, which you can see at the top of the image there. The weight of the panels had to correspond not only to the weight capacity of the ceiling, but to our ability to lift them into place in teams of 2. We had to reasonably estimate how much weight we could each hold. With one person on a ladder on each side of the panel, each person would have to hold sort of one side of the panel with one arm while zip tying it into place with the other hand. So you can see the images on the right are showing you an image above the panels, how that zip tie was working into the unistrut in the ceiling. So the zip ties allowed us to adjust and level the panels so that the ceiling seems as a continuous surface. For maintenance access to the lights and ducts above, each panel can be unhooked on one side and hang from 2 points, also a factor in the weight capacity calculation of the hooks and zip ties. In this image, we're looking at the white side of the panels, and you can see the orange and yellow tones kind of reflecting onto those white surfaces. So the idea of nomadic modularity comes up again and again with my clients. Like the shirt collar, many clients have diverse needs for a single space, and the design must accommodate this. Title Case is a joint venture between 2 independent typographers. Typographers are people who design and illustrate typefaces and lettering. So both of them moved from New York at different times, met in San Francisco, and are partnering on the space and various events within it, while maintaining independent practices within this single office space. The project is approached as a spatial puzzle that can be reconfigured indefinitely. Both partners plan to eventually expand into separate spaces, and faced with this situation, the choice is often relatively disposable temporary interior products. Like the Migrant Interior and Acumen Fund, we addressed this temporary condition through the development of permanent modular components, proportionately designed in dimension and detail for easy reconfiguration within the space and transferable to new spaces. So we designed custom shelving, custom desks, and benches. The scale of change exists in daily or weekly cycles within this single space. A title case working space for the two typographers and perhaps an intern becomes instructional space for hosting workshops. Instructional space becomes lounge space, and everything can be moved to the perimeter to act as a backdrop for social gatherings, lectures, and parties. Designed for a permanent state of flux and program, this project produces a permanently nomadic plan for a single space. For these clients, spatial informality and flexibility are required, but a clean professional quality to the space in any configuration is also essential. The clients participate in the making of the space every day and use the framework of the design as a platform for their own experimentations and occupation. Placemaking for tools of their vocation became highly specified. Organization and creative space on the desks are articulated through the specific location of things like pen holders. Right or left-handedness is accommodated. Preference for notebook or trace rolls and footrest are all part of the desk designs. Semi-permanent installations provide a consistent identity to varying events and configurations there, including this custom-made vacuum-formed translucent backlit ceiling in the bathroom. The lack of commitment to the space itself, but acknowledgement of the need for specificity and environmental identity and function, afforded a free experimentation as a series of ongoing physical and programmatic installations. So this past fall, I was asked to do an installation for a friend of mine who is a jewelry designer in Paris. The idea was to manipulate and change the perceived form of her corridor with an installation. She had given me a gift of a necklace years before, and I wanted to translate that gift into the installation for her apartment. So I made a rubber mold of the beads on the necklace and cast 3 different sizes and 10 different colors to produce the anchor weights for the suspended installation. Each line has 2 weights on it, counterweighting each other from the ceiling to the wall. The colors and the sizes gradated and shifted on each plane, moving down the corridor, and the white lines hang under lights and wraparound surfaces, casting different shadows depending on the time of day. The last project I want to show is a salon in downtown San Francisco. So this project was completed in the fall, and the client approached me last summer. They wanted me to help them envision a new salon/entertainment space that could accommodate the everyday workings of a salon, including a retail area and the ability to transform into an art gallery/party space for special occasions. All of this had to be designed and constructed within 4 months, with a total budget that's including permit fees, furniture, plumbing, electrical, everything, that would come in at 1/3 of the cost of a traditional build-out for a high-end salon. And they wanted to use friends as the main contractors, millworkers for all of the furniture and finish work. And the elevator could only fit 4x4 sheets of material, not the standard 4x8 sheets. So everything had to be cut in half before arriving on site. So this meant that the process of design and the format of design deliverables had to shift in order to meet all of these criteria, very limiting criteria, to meet budget and produce a beautiful and successful space. Annotated models work not just as a way for me to test the designs, but also as a tool for the client and their friends to understand the detailed information in the traditional sort of contractor-intended construction drawings. This meant that we could communicate intentions for the design and construction while simultaneously sort of teaching them the language of construction drawings in order to remain on budget and on schedule. In the end, they laid the floor, tiled the wash basin stations, painted and made every piece of millwork, so essentially everything you see made out of plywood in the project. All of the styling stands are on wheels and can push to the wall for gallery shows and parties. At the top of each mirror is a groove that can receive a picture rail hook so that art could be hung in front of the mirror and be lit by the internal LED lighting. Holsters for hair dryers and flat irons float above a power trough, so with electricity, at the base of the stands. And then the stands are plugged into the ceiling above and house all of their equipment, so that the sort of traditional trails of cords across floors and salons are totally omitted. The space can accommodate the expansion of their new business. So at a few months old, they've grown to half of the total capacity and anticipate filling the space with styling stands by the end of this year. We invited Eric, so one of the partners from Title Case, to come and install this mural in the bathroom to coordinate with all of their branding, which he also did. We designed this universal module, we call it the toggle stool, which when stacked up provides shelving for product, which you see in the background, a counter for the colorist in the back of the space, or when gathered together serves as tables for the lounge, and when they're dispersed, seating for parties. So there's a lot of other things that I'd like to talk to you about, but I want to save some time for questions. So why don't we open it up to that? Thank you.